Ja, då kommer vi börja vårt seminarium här nere på Elida. Jättekul alla ni som har kommit hit i regnet. Det här seminariet kommer vara på engelska, så jag gör bara en kort introduktion på svenska. Att vi kommer ifrån en organisation som heter Set My People Free, och vi jobbar för att de som lämnar islam ska ha samma rättigheter som alla andra och att kunna leva fritt och utöva sin nya tro eller icke-tro i sina hemländer. Now I'm going to switch to English because this seminar is going to be in English. We are from an organization called Set My People Free that work with people who have left Islam or are criticizing Islam around the world, that they will have the right to exist and to live freely in their home countries. Today, the focus is going to be the victims of apostasy and blasphemy laws in Islam, which are two laws that Set My People Free are fighting to abolish around the world. And we're very happy to have three guests with us today. Cheick Mkhaitir from Mauritania, who is one of the victims of apostasy laws in Mauritania and was imprisoned for 6 years because of this. Then we have Sonja Dahlmans, who is a theologian both in Islam and Christianity, and works a lot, is also an expert and a researcher when it comes to gender-based violence. We'll hear more about your work later in this seminar. And then Kamal Fahmi, who is the founder of Set My People Free. So we're very happy to have you here. We can give you a round of applause just in the beginning. So today we're going to talk about the victims of apostasy and blasphemy laws. I thought I would just give a short definition of apostasy and blasphemy. Of course, you will be even more expert in this, but a short definition. That apostasy means leaving a religion or a belief that you've had before, and in Islam it means leaving Islam. And blasphemy is criticizing or questioning Islam or the Prophet or the Holy Book, for example. And around the world, there are 11 countries where you don't have the right to apostasy or to blasphemy, to leave Islam or to question Islam. In the red countries, there is even death sentence for apostasy or blasphemy. I thought I would start with you, Cheick, because you come from one of the red countries, Mauritania, where there is death penalty for leaving Islam, and you were accused of apostasy. Dad, can you help to translate? Just, yeah.
بعض الأشياء الموجودة فيه فأنت حتشارك اختبارك الشخصي في الموضوع ده.
Yeah. So what did you do and how was it interpreted and what was the result?
الحصل شنو اللي عملته والنتيجة كانت شنو.
شكرا جزيلا لكم وأشكر حضوركم وأشكركم على هذه الفرصة.
I thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to speak.
أنا شيخ مخيطر من موريتانيا. ولدت في موريتانيا وعشت تقريبا 20 سنة الأولى من حياتي في موريتانيا.
My name is Cheick Mkhaitir. I am from Mauritania and I lived the first 20 years of my life in Mauritania.
كنت أعيش في موريتانيا حياة شبه طبيعية. أشتغل ودرست في موريتانيا، تخرجت من الجامعة وكنت أشتغل وأعيش حياة شبه طبيعية.
Well, I was living a natural kind of life. I studied, I finished university and I started to work in Mauritania.
ولكن عندما لاحظت في موريتانيا الكثير من انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان.
When I realized that there is a lot of violation of human rights in Mauritania.
مثل العبودية الإسلامية، العبودية في الشريعة الإسلامية.
For example, slavery in Islam, how the Sharia in Islam supports slavery.
مثل تزويج القاصرات.
And for example, marrying girls under the adult age around less than 10 years even.
مثل ضرب النساء
For example, even beating women.
وأشياء كثيرة لاحظتها بدأت أبحث ما هو سبب هذا الشيء.
As many other things, and I started to look around, and I realized this violation happening.
وبعد بحث طويل وجدت أن المشكلة هي مشكلة في الشريعة الإسلامية نفسها.
And when I started to look for the reason for what is happening, I found out the reason for this is the Islamic Sharia.
وجدت أن آيات القرآن يعني تجبر المسلمين على أن يفعلوا هذا الشيء.
I realized that the verses in the Quran encourage or allow these things to happen.
وهنالك بدأت أعبر عن رأيي الرافض لهذه الشريعة من خلال الكتابة فقط.
And I started to write and criticize and stand against this kind of violation of human rights which is written in the Quran.
في سنة 2013 كتبت مقال أنتقد فيه سياسة الإسلام تجاه الآخر.
Which year?
2013.
2013. He wrote an article against slavery.
Slavery in Mauritania.
In Mauritania. So he wrote an article criticizing that slavery is supported by Sharia.
هنالك تم سجني بتهمة الردة لأنني أنكرت العبودية.
They imprisoned him because he denied, he stood against slavery, and because he mentioned that slavery is supported by Sharia.
ولأنني أيضا في المقال هذا انتقدت النبي محمد.
And because in the same article I also criticized the Prophet Muhammad.
سجنت هنالك وبعد ذلك تمت محاكمتي وحكم علي بالإعدام.
So at that point I was arrested and put in prison and I was sentenced to death.
وقضيت 6 سنوات داخل السجن في انتظار أن يتم تنفيذ الحكم علي.
I was imprisoned for 6 years waiting to be sentenced to death.
خلال هذه السنوات كنت في زنزانة انفرادية.
During these 6 years, he was in solitary confinement in prison.
خلال هذه السنوات كلها كان يتم علي التعذيب الجسدي والتعذيب النفسي.
During this period also, I was tortured physically and mentally.
لقد حاولوا معي أن أعود إلى الإسلام وإلا فإنهم سيقتلونني لا محالة.
And they pressured me to return to Islam or they are going to execute me for sure.
أنا رفضت طبعا لأني لا أستطيع أن أعود إلى هذا الإسلام لأن أعتبر العودة إليه هي عودة إلى الشر.
And I refused to return to Islam because I realized that returning to Islam was returning to evil.
هنالك بدأوا بسياسة أخرى هي الضغط على عائلتي ويعني تشريدهم وفصلهم عن العمل.
Because of that, they started even to pressure my own family. My relative or my family, they were fired from their jobs. They lost their jobs and they made life difficult for them.
بعد 6 سنوات من تدخل الكثير من المنظمات الحقوقية استطاعت موريتانيا أن تخرجني بطريقة مؤقتة.
And then because of pressure from many international human rights organizations and countries, the government in Mauritania got me out of the country with very kind of complicated way, not so simple. They got me out.
وبعد ذلك جئت هنا إلى أوروبا وأنا الآن أعيش كلاجئ سياسي في فرنسا.
After I left to this nearby country, from there I came to France and now I live in France.
لكن عندما جئت إلى أوروبا أنا صدمت أيضا.
When I came to Europe, I was also صدمت in Arabic. I was shocked.
صدمت لماذا؟
Do you know why I was shocked?
لأنني وجدت أن الإسلام أو الشريعة التي أنا هربت منها قريبا سيتم تطبيقها في أوروبا.
I was shocked because I saw that the Sharia, the Islamic Sharia I escaped from it in Mauritania, it started to be practiced in Europe.
لأنه حتى الكثير من السياسيين الأوروبيين والكثير من الفاعلين الأوروبيين بدأوا يحمون هذه الشريعة الخطيرة من خلال مصطلح الإسلاموفوبيا.
Because the authorities and the different organizations in Europe, they started to support Sharia because of the pressure of this term which is called Islamophobia.
الشيء الوحيد الذي أنا متأكد منه أنه أوروبا هي المكان الوحيد الباقي في هذا العالم من أجل الحياة بسلام.
For me, I think the only place where now in the world you can live in peace is actually the West or Europe.
وإذا لم نعمل أي شيء حقيقي وجاد فإن الكوكب سيختفي، ستسيطر عليه الشريعة الإسلامية.
And if we did not stand firm to stop the coming of Sharia to the West, the whole world will be covered with Sharia, Islamic Sharia.
وأعتقد أنه يجب علينا أن نقول بصوت عالي أنه لا يوجد شيء اسمه الإسلاموفوبيا.
And we have to say it loud, there is nothing called Islamophobia.
لأننا نحن نخاف من الإسلام لأنه في الحقيقة هو مخيف جدا.
Because in reality we are afraid of from Islam because Islam in reality is scary.
الإسلام حين يصل عدد أفراده إلى 10% في مجتمع ما فإنهم سيغيرون كل شيء في هذا المجتمع.
When the Islam or Muslims community are 10% of the population, they will change everything in that community.
أنا الآن بدأت أرى في فرنسا وفي عدة دول أن يعني حتى الفرنسيين أنفسهم لم يعودوا قادرين على التعبير عن حقوقهم بسبب أن المسلمين يهددونهم بإحراق الشوارع.
And even I see now, I'm living in France, that the Westerners are not able to, the French people are not able to demand their rights because the Islamists are even threatening them in their own streets.
لأنه يعني هذه الشريعة الشريرة جدا يعني تأمر بقتل أي واحد مسيحي، تأمر بقتل أي واحد يهودي، تأمر بقتل أي واحد غير مسلم بدم بارد.
Because this evil Sharia, Islamic Sharia, it's demand from the Muslim to kill any Christian, to kill any Jews, to kill any infidel, or any yes.
نحن نسمع دائما عن مصطلح الجهاد.
We hear always about the term jihad.
لكن الكثير من الناس يفكر أن الجهاد يعني الجهاد بالسيف أو الجهاد بالسلاح.
Some people think maybe only jihad is using the sword or weapons.
No. لكن الجهاد الحقيقي عند المسلمين الآن هو الجهاد الثقافي.
But the real jihad they have today is the jihad of the cultural jihad or the culture forcing their own culture or teaching.
وهم يأتون إلى هنا بكميات كبيرة جدا من أجل أن يخلقوا مجتمعات موازية.
And they come here basically or for to have parallel societies in the community.
وهذا هو أخطر شيء لأنه حصل في بعض المدن الأوروبية صارت فيها مجتمعات بديلة وصارت فيها مجتمعات موازية.
This is very dangerous because we have started to have societies which are different or parallel to the existing communities in the country.
وأنا أتمنى أن كل واحد سويدي أن يشتغل من أجل أن لا يسمح بوجود مجتمعات بديلة داخل السويد.
And I encourage every Swede not to allow a parallel society to exist in Sweden.
لأنه إذا لم تفعلوا ذلك الآن فإن أبنائكم أو أحفادكم سيمرون بنفس التجربة التي مررت أنا بها.
Because if you don't do that, I think your grandchildren or your children will pass through the same experience I have passed through.
Thank you so much.
Merci.
Cheick, I'm going to ask you some more questions later as well. So we heard here about the situation in Mauritania, but that he also sees the threats in Europe. If this kind of ideology with apostasy and blasphemy laws are accepted here, if we are afraid to criticize Islam, what can happen here in Europe as well? Thank you. We're going to come back to a little bit what we can do and what you would like to see us do in Europe and how you want to help us against these laws here. But I thought I would also ask Sonja, because you also see a lot of the victims of apostasy and blasphemy, and especially women. Can you tell us give us some examples and show us a little bit how apostasy and blasphemy laws are used in violence against women?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation to speak here on behalf of the voiceless. What I'm about to talk about perhaps is a subject people not necessarily link with apostasy and blasphemy laws, but there is a link. What I research, what I write about, is the abduction, forced marriage, and forced conversion to Islam of little girls from religious or ethno-religious minority groups. That can be Christians, it can be Hindus, it can be Yazidis. I think some people in the audience remember what ISIS did with Yazidi girls in Syria and Iraq. But this also happens to girls from other religious minority groups. This happens in countries such as the northern part of Nigeria, where there are 12 Sharia states. It happens in Pakistan with Hindu and Christian girls. It happens in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq. By the way, not only Yazidi girls and women were abducted by ISIS and sold into sex slavery or forced to marry and convert, but also Christian women. And unfortunately, the Western media has forgotten about the Christian women. But I know some of them. They are real, and their suffering is real. This also happens in Mozambique. It happens in Burkina Faso, Bangladesh. I could go on and on. What happens, if you allow me in short, is that little girls, specifically minor girls, are abducted, sometimes by someone they know, like a neighbor or a teacher, a school sports coach, perhaps. And they are taken and they are forced to marry at a very young age with a Muslim man, an older man. And I have seen horrible things. I have seen little girls being taken, and while it is clear that they don't want to marry this man, they are screaming, they are crying, they are trying to run away, but people hold them back. And their thumb, their fingerprint is taken and just placed upon a marriage contract. And by that definition, they are then married. They are wives. What then happens is, or it happens prior to the marriage, they are then forced to convert to Islam. What people need to understand is that to us in the West, your religion is a private matter. It is something that maybe you go to church on a Sunday, and you live your life normally, right, during the rest of the week. The countries we are speaking about are countries where your religion is mentioned on your ID card, and it has economic, social, cultural, and legal consequences to change your religion. Christians in these countries, Hindus, Yazidis, are discriminated, they're marginalized. Often they have very poor income because they are not allowed to have, better paid jobs, for example, in Pakistan. And when these girls then are married, not really married, but considered to be married, what happens is that I just wrote a research report which was published last January for Coptic Solidarity on the situation of Coptic Christian girls and women in Egypt. What then happens is they completely disappear from the radar. Their families never hear from them again. Families who go to the police to report the missing of a girl are told that they'd better go home and not talk about this or else. In Pakistan, we hear similar stories. So families who raise their concerns, try to report the missing of a girl, and they are told they are not allowed to talk about that, or that the police simply just does not want to report a case or investigate a case. The same thing happens in the northern part of Nigeria, other countries I just mentioned. Sometimes girls are abducted in larger groups, so then you don't have individual cases, but you may recall the abduction of the Chibok girls in Nigeria, the schoolgirls that were taken one night. Amnesty did a report on that, Amnesty International, but failed to mention that over 90% of these girls were Christians, and that these girls were pressured during their time with Boko Haram, the group that abducted them, they had to follow Quranic classes. They were pressured by, for example, depriving them of food. And if you convert to Islam, you'll get food, or you get more food. They were pressured to get better treatment if they would convert and marry one of the Boko Haram members. All these things happen. And what it has to do with apostasy and blasphemy laws is, you've heard the example from the Cheick, right? What happens when you no longer want to be a Muslim. In some of the cases, when parents, for example, seek the media or social media, or when they have good lawyers, sometimes their case comes to court. What we have seen, for example, in Pakistan with a 15-year-old girl, is that after 3 months of investigating her case, this young girl, after being raped and forcibly married and forced to convert to Islam, she was then returned to her abductor. We have seen with another, there was a Hindu girl. We've seen with a 14-year-old Hindu girl, same story, rape, forced to convert, forced to marry, and then custody goes to the abductor. And with a Christian girl, also from Pakistan, 14 years when she was abducted, forced married, forced to convert. When she finally came free, so her marriage was annulled, but she was still considered a Muslim. And that was the problem. Because as you've just heard, that often involves the death penalty. So then her abductor, but also a very extremist group in Pakistan, then TLP, then they were circling around her family's house with big guns, rifles, threatening them to kill her because now she was an apostate. We have seen girls who refused, for example, in Nigeria, to convert to Islam, then for the rest of their lives being sex slaves. This happens to, today I think she is 7 years now imprisoned, first taken by Boko Haram, now Islamic State, West African province, Leah Sharibu. She was 14 years old when she was taken, and because she refused to convert to Islam, then they said she would be their sex slave for the rest of her life. And she's still in captivity. She was one of the Dabchi girls. So, yes, also in Egypt, girls or women who were abducted, when they, very seldom, when they come free, they are allowed to change their religion again to Christianity. Most of the time, they will stay Muslim. So even when the marriage is, annulled or declared invalid, the conversion isn't. And that is where the apostasy laws come in. And just one of the girls I interviewed when I did my research, this was in Egypt, one of the girls, she was, before she finally was allowed to return back home and become a Christian again. Well, she was a Christian, but officially become a Christian again. They harassed her, sexually intimidated her at the police station, undressed her, and they wanted to force her to confess that she had been sleeping around, so ruining her reputation, which is a big thing in these countries, as you probably are aware of. So these are the things that are happening, and we're not talking about incidents. In Pakistan alone, we're talking about 1,000 to 2,000 young minor girls every year. I am not talking about 1 or 2 girls. We're talking about, in Mozambique or Nigeria, girls who are abducted by the hundreds at the same time. In Egypt, hundreds a year. I'm not talking about incidental cases. Thank you.
So we really see how these laws affect people in different ways. The people who speak out by writing articles or questioning Islam, girls who really haven't done anything but are forced to convert, and then when they want to go back to their families, they use apostasy to keep them away from their families. Kamal, you started Set My People Free to work against these laws, apostasy and blasphemy laws. Can you tell me a little bit about the family that you met that inspired you or helped you to come with this idea to work against these laws?
I worked for a long time in the Middle East and also in Sudan, and somehow I was not realizing this problem which the ex-Muslims face in their own countries, and in a visit to of course I lost some of the friends I know, and they were killed, but somehow I didn't think about it seriously. But of course we wanted to see that the ex-Muslims can exist in their home countries, because what we realized that they get killed, and we had Mahmoud Muhammad Taha executed in Sudan for apostasy. And so in one of my visits to Yemen, I met and during that visit I had the opportunity to meet with a number of converts from Islam to Christianity. And I met a family which I spent the evening with. We had a kind of Bible study. And then the father said to me, Kamal, I want you to talk with my son because he is forced to take Islam in school, and I would like you to talk with him to let him study Islam. And so I said, well, I will try to do that. I will meet you the next day in one place and speak about it. And when I met his son, I was really touched and moved because he was very smart, very handsome, and he was a teenager. And I said, why should he go through this? Why should he has to say the Shahada? Why should he fast? Why should he be forced to memorize the Quran? And his father is a believer. He's a Christian. He should have the freedom to live the faith of his father. But I realized that he doesn't have this right. And that even the father does not have the right to live as a Christian, because in Yemen, they have the death penalty for leaving Islam. So actually the father was trying to encourage him to take Islam so he will not get into trouble. But then I realized even the father himself became a Christian when he was 19. And not only the father was a Christian, but the grandfather of the boy was a Christian before his grandchild. And so these are 3 generations, and they are not able to live as Christians. They are Yemenis, they are good Yemenis, and actually when they became Christians, they became better citizens to the country. And but they don't have the right to exist. And of course, I felt that this is not right. At that time it was 2008, and so we are living in 2008, and still some people, they don't have the freedom to live their faith. They don't have the right to live Islam. and even to have death sentence for leaving Islam. And then, like a continuous, I started to think of the different people. Some of the people who worked with us in Sudan who were killed because of their faith. And then the death of Mahmoud Muhammad Taha was executed for apostasy. And then I thought of, especially of Mahdi Dibaj, who was imprisoned in Iran after the Islamic Revolution. And he was accused of apostasy. He was the General Secretary of the Bible Society. He was sentenced to death. He was put in prison. And during his time in prison, he said, I'm not only willing to be in prison, I'm even willing to die for Christ. And after 10 years in prison, there was international pressure. He was released. And when he was released, the people said to Mahdi Dibaj, leave Iran because you are going to be killed. Because the man who helped him to come out was killed also. He was the pastor of the Pentecostal church in Tehran. And so he came out, but he said, I don't want to leave. This is my country. I want to share my faith with other people. And 6 months later, he was kidnapped. And then Iranian brothers told me they found his body cut to pieces in a plastic bag in a park. So this really pushed me to start this, because we want these people to have the right to exist. In a way, they are my heroes, because they are willing to die for what they believe. In spite it is, and this is injustice, not to allow ex-Muslims to exist in their home country. This is their countries. They love it. They are good citizens. Their only crime is that they left Islam. And then I realized that there is more than 11 countries. At that time, there were 13 countries which have death sentence for leaving Islam. We are thankful to have abolished it, but there is still also 15 countries which is crime to leave Islam. So and it is, you get tortured, you get imprisoned. It is true you don't have death sentence in those countries, other 15 countries. You can look at this map, actually. You can go to our website, freedomtoworship.org. You will get more information, the names of the country. And this really urged us to start set my people free. And we started in 2010. This year we have been for 15 years working mainly to change the law, because apostasy and blasphemy law are violating 2 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is violating Article 18, which say freedom of thought and conscience and belief, and freedom to change your religion and to practice your religion, which is 18, and 19, which is freedom of speech and opinion, and freedom to receive and impart information.
Thank you very much. Now we've heard some very difficult stories of what can happen to the people who leave Islam or who question Islam, but all 3 of you are also working to change the situation. Can you just tell me shortly, what do you do, and have you seen any positive results from your work? Tell them the questions.
Question again, please. ماذا تفعل لتغير هذا الوضع؟
أنا من جهتي يعني أعمل قدر المستطاع من ناحية العمل مع الكثير من المنظمات الدولية.
I do whatever I can with the international organization and community. I do whatever I can through the international organization working in human rights.
لكن العمل الأهم اللي أقوم به هو العمل على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي.
But the most important work to do is to work through the social media.
لأني أعتقد إنه وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي هي البوابة الحقيقية للجيل الجديد.
Because the social media is the door for the young generation.
والمستقبل الحقيقي يعني الوصول إلى الجيل الجديد والحصول على طريقة للتحاور وإيصال المعلومة للجيل الجديد.
And the way to do it is to really reach out to this new generation through the social media and to see a change in their lives. and have debates with them.
من خلال هذا العمل مع الجيل الجديد على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي استطعنا أن يعني نقنع بأفكارنا الكثير من الناس سواء في موريتانيا أو شمال إفريقيا أو الشرق الأوسط.
And through this, we have been able to influence a lot of people in these regions, in the Middle East and in North Africa and the Sahel, with using social media.
هذا يعني هذه الطريقة اللي أعمل بها بشكل أساسي.
And this is what I work with basically and focus on to change the new generations through the social media.
Yeah, it's a big job to change how people think, and it's very interesting that you start with the new generation to get a new generation that thinks differently when it comes to these laws and yeah. Sonja, you also meet a lot of these victims, but how does your work look like? How do you want to change the situation for the women that you have described earlier?
Well, luckily, the European Union, United Nations, they are waking up to this problem of abduction and forced marriage and conversion of non-Muslim girls. One of the things that we just did a few months ago, we handed in a paper, we meaning several organizations working together, right? And one of the things that we were trying to achieve with the UN was to annul these marriages. And when I read the proposal, the paper, the first thing I noticed was that the forced conversion wasn't mentioned. So yes, it's a good thing to annul these marriages, but you also have to annul their religious conversion. Otherwise, this blasphemy and apostasy laws will still go for these children. And they are children. That we're talking about 12, 13, 14-year-old children. So that is one of the most important things. And so that needs to change. And what I also believe, that is also what the Cheick is saying, is that we need a lot more attention for this specific problem. And one of the best ways to do that would be through the media. Unfortunately, the mainstream media doesn't report on these cases. You only hear about it when they can't deny it. So when there's a lot of victims, like 300 girls get abducted in one day or one night, that will finally, after months, reach the media. But why that is important is because we see from Pakistan and Egypt, for example, is that when there is public pressure through social media, as the Cheick also mentioned, then sometimes girls are returned. They're still not allowed to speak about what happened to them, but they will sometimes get returned. And I think that is one of the most important things.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to see happen? You mentioned a little bit that they need to look at the forced conversions as well. But this is a question for all three of you. Is there anything else that you still think needs to be done? And what would you encourage us as an audience or Sweden to do when it comes to these situations that you've described?
I think the best thing is talk about it as we do now and make sure that things don't remain hidden. I called my report for Coptic Solidarity Hidden Crimes, Public Deception. And a lot of times countries will say there's no problem. And when the Western media or Western politicians go along with that, these victims are abandoned by us. So public awareness by speaking about things as we do here today, I think is the best pressure we can use. Thank you.
Can you translate for Cheick? What would you like to see us do?
شنو الشيء اللي أنت بتطلبه منهم يعملوه عشان يغيروا الوضع الحاصل في الدول الإسلامية؟
من أجل يعني تغيير الوضع الحاصل في الدول الإسلامية يجب التوقف عن دعم الجماعات الإسلامية والدكتاتوريات الإسلامية.
One of the ways you can stop this is to stop supporting either financially or in any other way. You should stop supporting Islamist groups and the Islamic dictatorship.
أنا أعرف أنه الكثير من اليسار الأوروبي فقد قاعدته الجماهيرية المبنية على الفقراء أصلاً.
I know that
الكثير من اليسار السياسي الأوروبي
and most of the leftists in Europe have lost their majority of because they were depending on the people more impoverished people, the more poor and they're with great needs.
وهم يحاولون أنهم يخلقوا بروليتاريا جديدة من الإسلاميين ومن المسلمين.
And they are using now the Islamists as a new group similar to the impoverished people before or the people who are facing poverty to do their agenda.
لأنهم يبحثون عن قاعدة انتخابية بأي ثمن.
Because they are seeking for people to support them when it comes to elections and vote for them. They need a new base to support them instead of the impoverished people.
لكن صدقوني هذه القاعدة الانتخابية المتمثلة في الإسلاميين هي يعني سم مدفون تحت العسل.
They have to realize that these Islamists they are depending on it is like poison hidden in honey.
Yes. لذلك الشيء الوحيد اللي ممكن نحمي به المجتمعات مستقبلا هو أن نحميهم من الإسلاميين ومن اليسار الأوروبي.
So to protect our communities and society for the future, we have to protect them from the Islamists and from the leftists.
And for maybe if there is a leftist watching this, what would you encourage them to do to combat Islamism?
If إذا كان في واحد يساري بيسمع للكلام اللي احنا قاعدين نقوله الآن فأنت بتنصحه بإيه؟
اليوم اللي يصل فيه الإسلاميين للحكم اليساري سيكون الضحية الأولى.
When the Islamists reach power, they will be the first victims of this. The leftists will be the first victims when the Islamists reach to power.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not really sure how long time we've been talking, but I thought I would open up for questions. Now we've heard about the victims of apostasy and blasphemy laws in Mauritania, all around the world, the women who suffer under these laws, in Yemen, in Sudan, and we've heard a little bit of what work is being done and what they want to see done. But do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
I'm wondering why women in Europe fight so hard for Islam. Why?
Yes. So the question was, why do some women in Europe fight so much for Islam when we hear what the consequences are of this ideology?
السؤال هو مستغرب ليه النساء في أوروبا بيقيفوا خلف الإسلاميين.
النساء الأوروبيات
ليه بيقيفوا خلف الإسلاميين؟ ليه بيسندوا الإسلاميين؟
النساء في أوروبا.
النساء في أوروبا.
صراحة أنا لا أجد أي تفسير لهذه المسألة غير أنهم مش فاهمين الإسلام أصلاً.
I don't have really I cannot explain this. It is very surprising for him, and he doesn't find any reason. Mainly he thinks that they don't understand what Islam is all about.
لأنه في الإسلام الرسول يتحدث في حديث عند الرسول أن المرأة والكلب والحمار نفس الشيء.
Because in one of the talks or what Muhammad said, one of the sayings of Muhammad is that the woman is very similar to the donkey and the dog. There are not more from them. They are like a dog and a donkey. And she's mentally and religiously she's considered with special need, handicapped.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see that, for example, in London, in the United Kingdom, there were buses, you know, the famous red English buses, which had posters saying Muhammad was the first feminist. I don't know if that answers your question, sir, but if you teach people that, without, the sugar-coated version, without telling the verses that Kamal was talking about, and Cheick as well, then people are ignorant of what it really is. And again, when you speak about apostasy and blasphemy laws, this is what happens. Once you get in, it will be very difficult to get out, but it's very easy to convert because, you just have to say 2 lines, that's the shahada, and that's it. But unfortunately, this is the case, and often, obviously, also through, falling in love with someone, and then marrying, and then, these things happen also here. I also hear other stories, also from girls in the West, but unfortunately I can't say anything more because of safety issues. But yeah, things happening.
So there maybe it's important, like you mentioned, that we talk about it, and like you said also, to show what the reality of what Islam is and what it says in Islam, that they know about that, so that they understand the consequences. And like you said, maybe they live in a situation where they've never questioned any of these things, so then they don't feel any threats or any fear. But as soon as they question or they want to leave, that's when they realize the backside also. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is it lack of information? Because I believe that these women have the same information as I have, and I know that Islam is not that good, but these women...
Yeah, the question is, maybe they have the same information as me, and I have realized that this isn't a very good religion. It's very difficult to answer that question, maybe because none of us are the women who say that that we want Sharia. So maybe it's a little bit difficult to speculate, but we've come into some of the things. Is it that they don't know? Is it that they're in a situation where they haven't experienced all the backsides of Islam, and that's maybe why they don't see these issues in the same way? Yeah?
Is it possible to invite journalists to see this, to have it in this meeting? Is it possible to invite journalists to see this?
The question was if journalists are invited. We didn't invite specifically any journalists, but they're obviously very welcome to this. And we've also recorded this meeting, so it's online on our Facebook page, and we're also doing a more professional recording that we'll put up on our website. So Set My People Free on Facebook, or Freedom to Worship with a letter 2.org. There we will also have the video accessible, so you can share it with journalists. I thought just before we end, if you can just say one thing that you want us as an audience to take with us from everything that you've told us and shared. What is the most important thing you want us to remember or take with us when we leave?
أي شيء في جملتين قصيرتين. شنو الحاجة اللي أنت عاوزهم يخرجوا منها، أو فكرة يخرجوا منها هم خارجين من هنا، حاجة يتذكروها؟
أتمنى أن تتذكروا أن مسؤولية مستقبل السويد على عاتقكم.
The responsibility of the future of Sweden depend on you.
وأن أكبر خطر يتهدد السويد اليوم هو الخطر الإسلامي.
And the greatest danger which is facing Sweden today is the greatest danger facing the Sweden today is Islamism.
C'est ça.
Yes, I think the most important thing that I would have people to take from this meeting is that we have a moral obligation. It's a biblical obligation, but if you're not a Christian, we have a moral obligation to speak on behalf of those who are voiceless. And when it comes to children, specifically minor girls, Open Doors in their reports, they have an annual gender report, as they call it. They say women, these girls, are targeted because of their gender and because of their Christian or whatever other religion, their religious identity. And they are so powerless, they are voiceless. And if we don't speak up for them, I very much doubt that it will happen in these countries, which we have talked about today. So it is up to us to not abandon them.
I think the dream I have is these laws of apostasy and blasphemy laws will be abolished, and that ex-Muslims will have the freedom to live and practice their new faith or unbelief in their own countries, because at this point they don't have this right and this freedom. And I think we have to realize that, as Martin Luther King said, at the end, I will not remember the words of my enemies, but the silence of my friends. And I hope we will be voice for them, to put pressure on the international community, to put pressure on these countries to practice or do their international obligations to give their own people the freedom and not violate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Thank you so much to all three of you. We're very thankful to have you here, and we just want to give you a big round of applause. Thank you so much.